you have a podcast, the 21st Century Change Agent. And I was blown away because I was looking at the description and I was like, this speaks to my soul. This is absolutely a beautiful concept, you know? So I was like, hey, maybe I can learn something from you, even just about that. Like, what have you gotten out of that experience from having a podcast talking to people like this? People like yourself, actually.
I appreciate that. You know what? I still love that podcast and that little project, quite an extensive project that I did. But before I go in that, I think the initial motivation for me was twofold. Because I'm first and foremost, I consider myself naturally and inherently deeply curious about people, curious about their stories, their expertise. And so for me, this is something that I started doing the pandemic. So that was a way for me to feed the extroverted part in me, since we were all, in our own closed spaces. And I worked in an office of 1,500 people before that. So I was used to being around people. I was used to networking and meeting you. And I really loved that. That really was feeding my extroverted part every single day. And so for me, the first thing was like, okay, how can I recreate that in this pandemic environment? And so that was kind of like first motivation. So how can I get people, in my little space and I can get, talk to them? Um, the second part of that was I had just started business in the space of culture change, in the space of inclusion, leadership development. And while I had done that work in a corporate setting internally, running your own business in that space are two very different things. And at that time, I was
Very
very,
much
very
so.
early doors. So I didn't even know what running a business meant at that point, right? But
You never do until you actually start.
I'm 4.5 years in, and I'm still learning some lessons, fundamental lessons. And we can talk about that later because I've just embarked on a business coaching program, and the things that are opening up. Yeah, we can talk about that. So, so yeah, running your own businesses and kind of like working internally, even when you might have done a relatively similar thing, just not the same thing. And so, yeah, the first one was, how can I feed my extroverted side? How can I still meet people? How can I still have meaningful conversations? How can I learn about people? And the second part was I had just started business. And for me, it was, okay, so how can I now learn at speed and at scale? And how can I learn from the best in this space, from thought leaders, from people whose work I deeply respect, from people who are making really meaningful change within their communities, within whatever spaces they occupy, and people who are potentially not necessarily mainstream names that everyone already knows about, and their stories have already been, recycled over and over again. So I really wanted to learn, from people who are perhaps a little bit less known. Their names may have been a little bit less known, but they are doing some absolutely phenomenal work. So I wanted to do that. And so this podcast enabled me to do that, not while sitting in some like backseat at the back of an auditorium, but on the stage. I was learning from these people while sitting on the stage with them. And I love that. And of course, I gained some harder skills, such as like podcast production and editing technologies and graphic design and, and all of these kinds of things.
Always growing.
Always growing, yeah. And I guess, this kind of like, leads me to the part of your question around kind of like, what did I learn from it? And part of that was, the harder skills. But I guess it was also for me putting myself on a map as a subject matter expert at a time and an environment where we were all completely isolated and kind of like shun away from the world. What does that look like in a digital space? And I guess we were all trying to figure it out in our own ways. I definitely created a number of immensely incredible business opportunities and connections that with time have actually turned into friendships. People who I got to meet years later after the pandemic, and whom I have created and formed really strategic business partnerships with, business relationships with, whether they are directly us working together on something, or whether it's just, we are each other's tribe, so to say, where we can, bounce ideas, where we can keep each other, real and honest about things, where we can just like rant sometimes. What is this? Whatever it might be, those relationships that I created also during that, podcast time are still relationships that are really serving me in an amazing way. So,
are you saying that there's a chance that after all this conversation that we have today, that we will probably still keep in touch? We can still have some relationship that we can build through this? Is that what you're indicating might happen?
Laura, if you'll have me, I'll be honored. It's done. If you'll have me, it's done. Because I want to be your friend.
See, this is the other side of this. I gotta be honest. I definitely think a lot of those learnings that you had are things I've been picking up along the way. And anybody watching this over time, these episodes are not going out in order, so you won't get to see the progress as I do in that sense. But there have been learnings from each episode. You get a chance to understand, okay, do this a little bit better, make certain you give people a chance to express these parts of themselves and to share different kind of things, because this is such a great learning opportunity, not just for the other people, along the way who get to listen to this, some months or years down the road. But then in the process, there's so many things you can just be able to pick up, so many things that you can be able to just glean bits of wisdom from folks like you, who've been down this road before, who've had these experiences. And every conversation is an opportunity to learn. Like every conversation I've had has been an opportunity to be able to grow and to be able to pick something up that I have been able to say, okay, this makes me a better person if I do this. And that's exactly a thing I want in my week. Like, this is kind of a little bit different from what I do. I mean, I do a lot of research in my week, but I want to make certain that every week has something built in where there's an opportunity to have that connection with someone. There's an opportunity to be able to say, hey, you know something, I know something, let's be able to swap, let's be able to share, and let's see what we can do to make something better in the world, as a result of that. So people like you who are already doing this, thank you very much for showing the way for people like me. I really appreciate that.
I'll thank you for saying that. I'll listen, I'll take a moment to just process it and really absorb it, because I feel like, I'm here, absorbing wisdom from you just as much. So, I guess I think the podcast and these kind of conversations are a beautiful space where you can be a student and a teacher or whatever, both at the same time, right? And I think that's a very, very beautiful thing. And the other thing I wanted to say also, that one of the things I'm really, really proud of that, piece of work that I created is that, alluding to already what you said, is it's evergreen. If I was having some, tech conversations or investment or cryptocurrency conversations, they'd probably be obsolete within like a month, just because of the speed at which they, develop. But these kinds of conversations, they're timeless. And now just thinking about it, I'm also, it makes me think of one of my guests at one of the episodes. Actually, I ended up doing a double episode with Celia Daniels. So she is an international trans rights activist, out of the US. And we often, talk and say that even 3 years down the line, we are still sharing that episode or those episodes with people. And her episode specifically, is very, 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 we went very deep. And she recently, on LinkedIn, shared, as part of suicide prevention awareness, she shared a little bit of her story and the fact that she's lucky to be one of those people who, so to say, is alive to tell her story. And those kinds of parts of your story are traumatic to retell over and over again. And so I think the beautiful way of how these kind of conversations and podcasts or whatever format serves is that you don't have to retell your story over and over again. You can send that episode to someone and say, listen to this. And I think, again, organization, and especially organizations, because, that's the environment in which I operate in, it's very important to go and listen to these stories, to go and absorb them rather than all the time, once a year during the Inclusion Awareness Week or whatnot, inviting these people in to retell their stories, and then again, nothing is happening. Go and listen, go and really absorb with, sit with it, and then maybe drop some, the person, the guest, a message and say, I listened. This is how it impacted, how your story resonated with me. Thank you for your courage to do that for us, because she didn't do it for her entertainment. Celia did it for impact, for other people to hear and learn from those stories. So I think it actually is a beautiful act of service, these kinds of conversations and these stories.
Absolutely. And I think about that. So for me, when I decided to test this concept out for this particular series, I wanted to bring in a group of people whom, as you were mentioning, folks that maybe not everybody has heard of. And I want to take a look at people who are making changes at different areas, different aspects, different levels, because you want to make sure that people can understand that anybody can do something. Anybody can make something better, in the world around them, whether that's their workaday world, whether that's their society and such. Anybody can do something. And I wanted to make certain we had enough examples, not just about the how, but also the who. So thinking about the different kinds of stories, the different kinds of perspectives that one can bring in. There is some intentionality with it, but it's also a matter of kind of reflection of some of the network that I've built over, the time in my career. And I was looking at this and I was very proud. I was like, wait a second, I actually, without as much thought into it as perhaps I could have done, we've gotten people from various continents, different genders, different, religions, different backgrounds in terms of like education, fields of application. We've got various kinds of people and various stories, because what I want to make certain is that we kind of challenge that notion, that narrative of what a change maker looks like, or what that person is, or who that person is. When we say these are the people who make an impact in the world around us, I want you to be able to see that person can look like anybody. That person can be anybody. That person can be you. And I want people to be able to see themselves in that as much as possible. So that's absolutely a thing to keep in mind, especially we've talked about in the space of like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have to make certain that we practice what we preach, and that we are, making certain that we make space for various kinds of voices. We make space for various kinds of people to be able to share their stories and their realities, so people can listen, so people can learn, so that can be a reference for other people to grow from as well. So this is why we're doing this,
Beautifully said.
But, I think a lot of times for me, I've definitely been guilty of maybe underestimating the power of a voice. That sense, like, I'm not a person who is always out there when it comes to like social media. I have some things I'll put out there related to my work. But I'm not always a person who's out there, saying things a lot of times. And I'm a very private person, so I kind of keep my own life to myself. But I have seen some impact, like when you realize sharing different stories and people are giving different perspectives, and you see that they connect with more people, and those people are sharing more things, and they get a chance to be able to have new opportunities, new doors opened, new possibilities that happen as a result of sharing and speaking and providing that perspective to the world. I love that. I love to see that happen. And I hope that, in your work as well, it's something where you get to see and celebrate the different kinds of opportunities, different kinds of doors that can be opened when we take the time and intentionality to do so,
Hey dears. Okay, one quick note just to say this is actually part of a few chunks that you're going to get from this call with Baiba Ziga. Baiba is fantastic. I adore her. So if you want, I would definitely recommend subscribing so you can actually be notified when the next part of this conversation comes out. So stay tuned. That's coming your way. This is part of the series called Upward Conversations, which I have basically to encourage and support people who are making a positive change in the world or in the workplace. So if that happens to be you, I would love to just be able to say, hey, I'm so glad you're here and keep going. I really think you're doing great stuff. So let me know what you're up to. Let me know how I can support you. So hope to see you around, and yeah, have a great one. Take care.